College football previews coming your way here at the Voice of College Football, and it appears as though maybe USC and Notre Dame are going to have to reach a college football playoff to play each other. That's a shame, certainly. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football for the College Football Show. Lock it in, leave those comments and questions there in the chat. We are here for you. Let us know how long we should stick around to take your calls and answer your comments and questions. And we got Matt Zemek here, of course. Trojans Wire, and also catch Matt on the USC channel each and every week on Trojans Live. Matt, how you doing tonight?
I'm not doing well. Like, this does not sit well with me, USC Notre Dame. And for people who think, hey, I'm the host of a USC show, I'm the editor of a USC blog, people might think, oh, it's all Notre Dame's fault. No, this is Lincoln Riley. Lincoln Riley's soft. Lincoln Riley's a coward. It starts there. USC worrying about logistics. Well, hey, you went to the Big Ten, right? And I know that wasn't Lincoln Riley's move, but still, you're trying to move up in the world. You're trying to be a heavyweight program. I mean, if you're USC, it should be, we take on all comers, right? That was the Pete Carroll way. Pete Carroll would go down to Auburn. He'd go play tough teams on the road in non-conference early in the season. Pete Carroll didn't shy away from anybody, right? And it's very different with Lincoln Riley. Let's remember, bailed out of the Ole Miss game. That was originally on the schedule. And now bailing out of this, and he wants it only on his terms, playing it early in the year. So it does start with Lincoln Riley. So people think that I'm going to let Lincoln Riley skate. No way, no chance. All right, so we can start there. But Notre Dame's not blameless here either. We can also say that. And let's go back to, when the discussions were very contentious a few months ago, and Marcus Freeman said, we'll play anyone, anywhere, anytime. Now, I'm not necessarily going to blame Marcus Freeman for saying something which turned out to not be true, but I will say this. If Marcus Freeman said that not knowing what his administration's actual position was, not knowing what athletic director Pete Bavacqua's actual position was, then that was pretty irresponsible of Marcus Freeman. But if it was a case where Freeman was 100% convinced Bavacqua was going to make the series continue no matter what, then it's more of a Bavacqua issue. But one way or the other, for the coach of Notre Dame to speak that aggressively and clearly and definitively, and then Notre Dame doesn't back that up in terms of playing anyone, anywhere, anytime, you can hate that Lincoln Riley's a coward. I do. You can hate that USC wanted to move that game up to late August. I do. It belongs late in the season. So in that sense, Notre Dame was in the right. But if Notre Dame really was all in, a Notre Dame reporter earlier on Monday said Notre Dame was, quote, always all in, unquote, on continuing the series. Well, no, that's empirically untrue. Because if Notre Dame was all in on preserving and continuing the series, Notre Dame would have accepted USC's terms. And that really gets to the heart of it, that neither school wanted to accept a deal that was on the other school's terms. So instead of reaching an imperfect, flawed, temporary settlement, they both walked away from the table. So they both bear blame. If you want to say USC's primarily to blame, yes, I agree. Lincoln Riley is the prime culprit, the central reason this is stopping. But Notre Dame could have just accepted USC's terms for at least 2 years and kind of had just a temporary patchwork agreement. No, Notre Dame wouldn't go for that. So Marcus Freeman's anywhere, any place, anytime turned out to be wrong. And that's a bad look. And it means that Notre Dame does share the blame. Now, here's, though, where USC is really, really stupid. Here's where Jen Cohen, USC athletic director, really misplayed her cards. This is the mess here that USC is creating for itself. Lincoln Riley's on the hot seat, or if he's not on the hot seat, he's close. And he really has to deliver in 2026. Regardless of what you think about Lincoln Riley, he has to do something special, or at least really good, in 2026. If Lincoln Riley steps on a rake and fails miserably in 2026, he's gone. So USC and Notre Dame are postponing their series. They're stopping their series for 4 years. But Lincoln Riley, the guy who doesn't want to play Notre Dame late in the season, wants it to be early, if at all, he'll be gone. So Jen Cohen, who, I get it. Look, I cover USC. Of course, I understand that Jen Cohen's job is to keep Lincoln Riley happy. But Lincoln Riley is in a tenuous position. Lincoln Riley's been failing at USC. So the move for Jen Cohen was to accept the 2-year extension, traditional timing of the games, mid-October in South Bend, Thanksgiving weekend in LA. Jen Cohen just needed to accept the 2-year extension. And that way, it's very simple. If Lincoln Riley crushes it and he gets USC to the playoff and he gets USC to the top tier of college football once again, then you can play hardball in 2028. And then you can say, hey, we demand better, we deserve better, but you haven't gotten to the top tier. And Lincoln Riley's position at USC should not be assumed to be safe for the next 4 years. Now, the next 2 years, okay, I can go with that, but not the next 4. So you accept a 2-year deal, and if you're Jen Cohen, you say, Lincoln Riley, please win at USC, okay? Please do the job you were paid for. Do the job that you were supposed to do. Get this program to the top tier of college football. And if you do, then I will reward you by giving you all that you want. I will give you hardball negotiations with Notre Dame so that if we continue this game, it will be Lincoln Riley on your terms. But no, Jen Cohen wanted to make Lincoln Riley happy now, and so she's setting up this situation that I've just outlined. He could get fired this year or early 2027, and yet you've postponed the series for 4 years, and Lincoln Riley's not going to be around for it. So clearly, Jen Cohen misplayed her cards at USC. I wonder if there's any possible chance for her to reconsider, but given that Notre Dame put in the scheduling agreement with BYU, that does not seem very likely. So just Jen Cohen's a terrible poker player, and it's a really sad day for college football. Not just USC, not just for myself, but for college football, because in a world with so little tradition, so few things that you can count on, this was one of them. And now it's gone. And what adds to the frustration and the pain here is that next year, 2026, was going to be the 100th anniversary. That's supposed to be a special occasion. We made it to 100. Nope. The patient got killed at age 99. Kind of like Betty White. Betty White died right before her 100th birthday, right? So this is like Betty White dying before her 100th birthday. It didn't have to happen in this case. Like this case, that wasn't about a patient getting old. You can die at any moment. No, this was euthanasia by Jen Cohen and also Notre Dame, but mostly Jen Cohen and Lincoln Riley. So it feels like a death in the family. I know that this is just sports. This isn't life and death. This isn't poverty. This isn't medical bankruptcy. This is not, a true trauma on a true life and death scale. But in its own realm and on its own terms, it makes me absolutely sick. And I just have had a pit in my stomach all day long.
So I want to get some things straight from my own understanding, which I think I've got, but I just want to clarify as well for everyone in the chat that I assume everyone's aware USC Notre Dame obviously play every year, and it's one of the great rivalries in college football. It is the cross-sectional national rivalry in college football. Just to make this clear, so USC plays Notre Dame every other year at home in the Coliseum at the end of the season. They play in mid-October every other year in South Bend. Lincoln Riley wants to play this game at the end of August, first week of September, because basically the Big Ten schedule is tough and he's trying to avoid late season losses that don't look good. Is that conjecture or just reasoning, or has this been stated?
Well, that is the general consensus in terms of why USC, Riley, and Cohen wanted what they want. That they want to play that game early so that they have a couple weeks to then schedule, two cupcakes to fill out the rest of their non-conference schedule and get a buffer between the Notre Dame game and the Big Ten schedule and the grind of Big Ten play. They don't want that Notre Dame game to either be in the middle of or at the end of the Big Ten slog.
And then from the Notre Dame side, obviously the one concession I will give USC is that they play in a conference with a 9-game schedule, so they have less flexibility. Notre Dame pretty much can, they've got the ACC at their beck and call to do whatever they want in regards to moving these games here and there. So the fault of Notre Dame, or the blame in this sense, from your perspective, Matt, is that Marcus Freeman went out there and stated that, we'll take on all comers at any time. We go anywhere at any time, but that's not necessarily the case. Do we know when Notre Dame wants this game to be played? They're probably good with the status quo.
Yeah, Notre Dame wanted to stick with tradition, which, hey, I agree with that. I want that. Like,
Sure.
This is about preserving tradition. So, I was on Notre Dame's side in terms of, hey, why are we messing with success? Why are we messing with something that works? And another point I'll give to Notre Dame is, Notre Dame was winning this game. Like, USC looks like a coward, not just for wanting to change the timing of the game, but USC's been losing, right? And so the solution to the Notre Dame issue for USC is to win, so that's another thing I'll give to Notre Dame. But when Marcus Freeman said anyone, anywhere, anytime, so late August, that's anytime, all right? If you're going to say that, you should be willing and able to back it up. So I'm not saying that Notre Dame should have just, acceded to USC's demands, but when your head coach says we'll do it on any terms, you can't walk away from that. Or if you do, you're just then what you say can't be trusted in the public forum, in the public commons. So that really is, I think, being overlooked to a degree by national commentators. Most of the criticism goes to Lincoln Riley, and I think that's fair, because again, if you're assigning most of the blame, Lincoln Riley deserves it. I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm not running away from that. But to say that Notre Dame is blameless and Notre Dame did all the right things, well, no, because the coach said anyone, anywhere, anytime, and then either Marcus Freeman didn't mean it and he was just playing politics, which I kind of doubt. I think Freeman's a straight shooter. I don't think he'd just say something to stir the pot. He doesn't strike me as that kind of guy. I think he sincerely thought Pete Bavacqua was going to follow through, that the administrators were going to follow through. But no, Pete Bavacqua did not follow through and back up his coach. So I really do think it is a Pete Bavacqua issue from the Notre Dame side. And let's include this in the mix, that Notre Dame opting out of the bowl game and Pete Bavacqua reacting the way he did to that. I think Marcus Freeman does want to play anyone, anywhere, anytime. I don't think Pete Bavacqua shares that same mentality given his actions. And he's in the upper tier of executive leadership. So he certainly plays a role in establishing the culture. And I think it's a Bavacqua problem a lot more than it is a Marcus Freeman problem. But it remains that Marcus Freeman, you shouldn't say something like that unless it's airtight and it really does reflect the whole university administration's position on the issue. It obviously did not.
One other question I have, Matt, before we get to super chats and calls, would be Notre Dame plays at USC at the end of the season. This always annoyed me that breaks up USC, UCLA playing the final weekend of the season. It's a tradition that breaks up every other year. And then you've got USC traveling to Notre Dame in mid-October, as we just saw this past season. Do you know if that originally was scheduled like that so USC would not have to go to Notre Dame in bad weather?
I'm sure it was part of the calculus. One other thing I will say is that, in the years when Notre Dame doesn't go to USC to end the season, it goes to Stanford. It goes to the
Yes.
Bay Area. And so both of those are they go all the way back to Newt Rockne. Like Newt Rockne made it a practice, to go out to the West Coast for Notre Dame to build that national brand in carrying the gospel of Notre Dame football to the West Coast. So I think it's rooted a lot in tradition, just that Notre Dame would go to the West Coast every year. Some years it would be to LA, some years it would be to Palo Alto to play Stanford. So a lot of it's in tradition, but I'm sure part of it is, USC not going to South Bend when the weather was especially nasty in late November.
Voice of College Football here with the Late Night College Football Show. You will see a little less of me over the next 5 to 10 days, a little bit more of Matt, John D'Adamo, Corey Bratta, and others hosting over the next week or so. So that should be good. And
let me just
yes.
mention, I'll be hosting on Christmas Eve and Christmas night at this time slot. I can make that announcement. So, if you've wrapped all your presents on Christmas Eve, gather around for a Christmas Eve chat. We'll talk a little Hawaii Bowl, of course, and then Christmas night. And of course, the Chiefs have their third string quarterback. So that Christmas night game against the Broncos, who cares now, right? I mean,
Who's
people
the
in
Chiefs'
Denver
third string
do.
quarterback?
Yeah, because Minshew got hurt against the Titans,
But
so they're down to
we know who their
QB3.
third string quarterback is?
I don't know. I
Okay.
won't pretend to know.
And that doesn't mean that I'm going to disappear, everyone. So my schedule is just up in the air for the next roughly 10 days. There's going to be some gaps in there that will go back to regularly scheduled programs. So my kids basically own my schedule for about 6 days. That doesn't mean I'm completely off the grid. You will see videos from me. I may pop up at 10 in the morning. I may pop up at 3 in the afternoon. If I'm going to have some dead time, I will be here. I just can't commit to an exact schedule. So I appreciate Matt, John, Corey, and others picking up the slack. So please join them. All right. We've got a couple super chats coming in. We've got Evil Badger 72. Appreciate you, Evil Badger. Hey, Mark and the real MVP. Didn't Oregon and Tennessee get blown out by Ohio State in last year's college football playoff? Blowouts happen. Stop whining. Your ESPN bias and wanting more SEC teams in to the rig it for the SEC. The Big Ten will three-peat. Okay. All right. Sure. I don't know what to tell you besides, yes, blowouts happen even between good teams. Yes, it does happen. But
so Mark, let's tackle this topic, because it's a topic that flew around social media. I'm sure you probably addressed it on your Saturday show, that the 4-team playoff was better than the 12-team playoff because of the blowouts that we saw. Let's just tackle this. All right. People have short memories around here, Mark, as you probably know, from hosting a billion shows. Can I remind you that the first ever playoff game, the 2015 Rose Bowl, Oregon 59, Florida State 20. It was an absolute wipeout. Next year, Alabama 38, Michigan State nothing. And Clemson hammered Oklahoma in a game that wasn't particularly close in that playoff too. 2016, Clemson 31, Ohio State nothing. Alabama beat Washington in a game that was never remotely close in the Peach Bowl. LSU beating Oklahoma by 35. Alabama beating Oklahoma easily in 2018. In 2021, Georgia absolutely stomps Michigan. That game was never close. Alabama by 3 touchdowns over Cincinnati. Do I need to continue here? That the 4-team playoff, Clemson 30, Notre Dame 3 in 2018 as well. The 4-team playoff, the semifinals were usually blowouts. So like the 4-team playoff was not this paragon. We have short memories around here. So not only do blowouts happen, but they happened a ton in the 4-team playoff era. The semifinals were usually blowouts, not usually close games. 2022 with TCU winning that shootout against Michigan, and then that epic Peach Bowl between CJ Stroud and Stetson Bennett, like that was the aberration. That was the exception, not the rule. So we really need to be clear about how not that great the 4-team playoff was and how it was some kind of Valhalla. It was some kind of gold standard. That is just empirically not true. Let's get rid of that talking point, please, everybody.
Let's see. We had 11 seasons. We had 33 games. We had a handful of classics, and they were great, but there was just a handful of Ohio State, Alabama 2014. Obviously Ohio State, Clemson 2019 classic, Georgia and Oklahoma at the Rose Bowl, of course, in 2017. And there's a small collection of classics. Just to get back to this comment. Okay, Evil Badger, I would love for you to call sometime, and you don't want to debate this point. Yes, the SEC clearly has dominated this sport from roughly 2005 to just a season or two ago. And even in this current season, by far had the best record against the other conferences, despite playing the toughest games, the best teams out of conference. They still had the best record. It's not even close against the other conferences. Yes, the SEC is by their standards, they're in a slump. So 2023, Alabama loses. Just grasp this. Maybe Nick Saban's worst team loses in overtime. They lose by one play to the national champions. And then last season, yes, we saw Texas win. We saw them lose to the eventual national champions, which may have been the de facto national championship game. Certainly was the best game among the Titans there at the end in the semifinals in regards to challenging Ohio State. I'm not saying it was a great playoff for the SEC last season. Georgia lost to Notre Dame by 13, and again, Texas won. Then they gave a sturdy fight against Ohio State. They were within 1 yard of tying the game with 4 minutes left. Tennessee got blown out. I don't think anyone was too shocked by that, especially after they saw what Ohio State was capable of after that. So not a great 2 years for the SEC, but my goodness, it's not been anything close to embarrassing. We will see. Texas A&M is not a great football team. Let's understand that the best team in the ACC this year, I think all would agree, Miami, the best team in the ACC, beat the sixth best team in the SEC. I know they went 11-1, but look at the results. They obviously, Georgia better, Ole Miss better, Alabama better, and Texas, Oklahoma better. So let's not run the SEC into the ground yet. Those teams that we could argue Alabama, the others clearly earned their spots, and Alabama, I believe, earned its spot. And here we go. So that nonsense is well overstated. And we talk about blowouts. Yes, the group of 5 teams will be blown out 98% of the time. Yes, there are other blowouts, but they are not the norm. So your points are weak, thin, and unfactual.
Let me just duck in this quick point. I'll be brief on this one. Sure. Is that, in the NCAA tournament, we're so used to the 12-5 upset. Different sport, right? It just doesn't work the same in basketball as it does in football. I think so many people are conditioned to think 12-5 upset, that they think a 5 versus a 12 should be a really close, interesting game in football. It's not the same as basketball. I think there's that psychology of that Americans are so conditioned to picking a 12 over a 5 in their bracket in March that they think it should carry over to football. It doesn't. Let's get that one straight.
And if I'm not mistaken, even though I haven't covered, let alone watched college basketball in quite some time, that 5-12 wore off at some point. It lasted for a long time. And then I remember seeing some statistics that for a good 5 to 10 year stretch, it wore off. and it swung the other way, and it ceased to become the gem of the wild upset selections. So Evil Badger, just take the group of 5 games and give me a scoring differential on average versus the power conference teams playing. It's just not debatable. So I don't know where you're going with that. All right. Adam, appreciate you being here. Of course, Matt, 3 years ago on the USC show, I told you and Tim that Riley had no class. He should. Now he's ducking a competitive schedule, and the deeper issue is clear. Jen Cohen is incompetent and should be fired.
Okay, Adam, I do remember having these conversations about Lincoln Riley being a coward, being scared. I've called him a coward. And in my writing at Trojans Wire today, I've called him a coward and that he's soft. So I'm not running away from that, and I'm not sparing Lincoln Riley either. And I've just made the point earlier that Jen Cohen should have gone along with Notre Dame's preferred terms for a 2-year extension, precisely because Riley's on the hot seat. So why are you postponing or stopping the series for 4 years when Lincoln Riley might get fired in 1 or 2 years? So I criticized Jen Cohen. So, Adam, I remember the conversations with Tim Prangley, and I said, wait and see. Like, he hasn't capitulated yet, but today he has, and you're right, and I have to give it to you. So, like, I'm not disputing anything you're saying here. So, Adam, you won. You were right. I was wrong. I lost. That simple.
All right. You will notice on the screen we've got some fine apparel. So you combine your 2 favorite brands, the Voice of College Football, and your favorite team. And I just happen to display some Notre Dame gear right there. And again, select your favorite team. VOCFB.com, VOCFB.com. The real MVP stopping by. What's going on?
Well. Normally I don't disagree with Matt on hardly anything he says, but I was just like, I think it's because it's USC and there's an emotional attachment to this rivalry and the historic game, and the fact that college football fans were completely robbed of a great game. But just cold calculated, you're looking at the USC perspective. No reason to play this game. Literal no reason. Texas showed us this year you could lose to the best team in the country, go 9-3, and miss the college football playoff. Now, I know everyone's saying about the Florida game. If they lost to Florida, they would have been in. And you're absolutely right. But 2 things can be true at once. If they had played anyone else in the country other than Ohio State, they would have been in the playoffs because they would have had to be ahead of Oklahoma because of head-to-head results. So for USC, there is no reason to play this game. This sport is solely based on you are what your record says you are, and it is actively killing the sport. This is a very large unintentional consequence to the college football playoff expanding from 4 to 12 teams.
The real MVP, I can't argue with most of what you're saying, but I can argue with one thing you're saying, that there's no reason. There's at least one reason for USC to play Notre Dame, and that's to beat Notre Dame. And so, if you're like, one part of my overview of sports, my overall outlook on sports, the real MVP, is that, if you are a big brand, if you're a big name team, doesn't matter, college football, like in soccer, if you're Liverpool, if you're Manchester City, in baseball, if you're the Yankees, basketball, you're the Celtics or Lakers, if you're one of those franchises, you should say, you know what? Bring it on. Anywhere, any direction, anytime, any place, in a parking lot, behind a bush, whatever. We will take on anybody because we are the Yankees. We are the Celtics. We are the Dallas Cowboys. We are, the big cheese. USC is supposed to be one of those programs. So, and Pete Carroll had that attitude, we'll just bring it on. We relish competition. We want to play the best. So there's that attitude of just wanting to be the best and go through the best. So that's the one reason. Now, in terms of how you broke it down with Texas playing Ohio State and making the playoff, you're 1,000% right. And I get that and I understand that. But let's also realize that at USC, Lincoln Riley's had soft teams. He's had soft teams that knuckle under, that succumb against Notre Dame, against other elite opponents. If USC was really getting it done, then I would think, okay, USC has some leverage here. USC can kind of dictate the terms of the agreement. But because USC's kind of scratching and grasping at success, it hasn't really locked it down the way it did under Pete Carroll. It feels like a desperate move. And I would say, hey, if you're USC, win 10 games, right? And you lose once to Notre Dame, that shouldn't ultimately affect you. And you brought up the point. Texas could have just beaten Florida, and it could have scheduled the tough game against Ohio State, and it still wouldn't have mattered. You make a lot of logical points, but I think I go back to that idea that if you're USC, you should hold yourself to a higher standard. And this is not that. And I think that's always a valid reason for USC to be as ambitious and aspirational as it possibly can.
I understand that, but at some point you got to work smarter and not harder. And I think you're just working harder and putting yourself at a tactical disadvantage. USC plays in the second best conference almost every single year. They play a significantly better schedule than Notre Dame almost every year. So to me, this game for USC means nothing, and this game for Notre Dame means everything. And the perfect example is I saw a report that they were really upset about the memorandum of understanding, which if Notre Dame's in the top 12, so even in a hypothetical scenario, USC goes out there and beats Notre Dame by 3 points. The committee could just say, well, they won, they're 11, Notre Dame's 12, Notre Dame's in the playoff, USC's out. So at that point, you could win the game and not be selected into the college football playoff. Why would you play a game in which you can win it and have no reward?
The real MVP, you bring up a really, really good salient point here, and I haven't seen or heard this discussed in today's reporting and today's conversation. Did Jen Cohen and or USC demand that Notre Dame rescind the memorandum of understanding as a condition for continuing the series? So I don't know if that happened or what happened, or if that was a particular negotiating sticking point. But like, if USC walked away from the table for that specific reason, that would change my mind. That would influence my thinking, because that would be a reasonable demand. The point was made. USC could beat Notre Dame, and yet Notre Dame is, they both finished 10-2, and Notre Dame is 12 and USC is 11. But Notre Dame gets in because it's top 12. So
can you imagine?
That you bring up a hugely important point, but I haven't seen it discussed or reported on in terms of what actually happened at the negotiating table between the two parties.
Yeah, that's what I don't remember who I saw it reported by, and it could be fake news. You know how everything on social media, you take it with a large grain of salt. But the reason I saw USC was they were using the memorandum of understanding as a large leverage point, because that's why they wanted the game played as early in the season as possible. That way, if they lost, it gets out of the committee's mind, similar to the Miami Notre Dame situation, where maybe they would be ranked so far ahead of them they couldn't close the gap in time. And also, apparently USC wasn't notified that the memorandum of understanding was even signed in the first place. They found about it the same as everyone else did.
Which was not that long ago. Yeah.
Right.
Like when this was being discussed in September, October, the memorandum of understanding was not publicly known by USC or by most college football fans. So that's a really important point that you're bringing up. No question.
Yeah, and to me, if USC did it on principle for that reason and that reason alone, I think they're completely justified in not doing it, because Notre Dame needs to stop acting like they're special.
I would agree. That would implement again. That would reshape my thinking, but I just haven't seen it come up in most of the reporting and conversations.
That's absolutely fair. And I want to ask you, because college football as a sport, this "you are what your record says you are" mentality, I think, is legitimately killing the sport. In my opinion, I know I'm way out there in left field. Texas A&M, despite being 11-1, despite being in the best conference in college football, I don't think did enough to earn a bid in the college football playoff. It's not necessarily their fault. It's their schedule stunk. Their schedule was horrendous.
If I could jump in there, Darrell, I agree with where you have headed with this whole argument. And obviously, this is not the first time you brought this up. We've discussed this many times. But to fix what you are trying to fix, the schedule has to be fixed. You can't hand Texas A&M a schedule in which the 7 teams they beat are 12-44 in the SEC, and all they can do is beat those 7 teams, and they trip up against Texas, and they beat Notre Dame on the road and say, not good enough, you're out of the playoffs. You have to address the scheduling and make the scheduling equitable. You can't just hand out tough schedules and easy schedules like Texas A&M received this year and just say, you got to go perfect. You got to be perfect or you're out of the playoff.
Right, but I do think there is some factors we can use that doesn't, because I don't know how realistic it is to get out of the scheduling hands for the teams. So what I would introduce is the quad system in college basketball. There's 16 and 14, 17 and 13 teams that make it into the tournament because their schedule's ridiculously tough. Texas A&M controls a quarter of their schedule every single year. If they think, well, man, we're looking at the schedule in 2027 and we see South Carolina, Missouri, Kentucky, and all these garbage teams, they can reasonably expect they're not going to have a strong SEC schedule. Then play 2, what I would consider quad 1 games, 1 on the road, 1 at home, beat one of them, dominate the rest of your schedule. Then you would have had enough to make the playoffs. Like if Texas A&M went out there and scheduled Iowa, for goodness sakes, or somebody just halfway decent on the road, just to give us another data point, I think they would have deserved it. But them ducking every single team needs to be addressed. I don't.
So in this case, Texas A&M is supposed to schedule Notre Dame and Iowa on the road just to balance a schedule that they're guessing is going to be bad, even though about half of those SEC teams, as you well know, DeReal, can jump up and be competent, if not excellent. LSU, there are some teams on that schedule that are down, Florida, LSU, that could be 10-win, 11-win football teams. That's why the scheduling has to be fixed. And it can't be this, we're scheduling out 5 years. There's no reason to. The NFL, Major League Baseball scheduling 162 games. You talk about a task. This should get done in the off season every year. There's no reason to schedule games 10 years in advance.
If I can jump in on scheduling and on the Texas A&M problem, with the SEC opponents might have looked good on paper before the season, but they didn't turn out to be as good. May I remind everyone that flex scheduling, one flex game per season gets at this problem because, again, the whole principle of a flex game is you get to week 8, week 9, late October, and you see what the conference race is, which teams are good, which teams are bad, and you're basically creating a system and process where, all right, these 2 really good teams in the upper tier of the conference should play each other, and they're not on the set schedule. You guarantee that higher end teams in conferences are playing each other. And of course, that would mean that lower tier conferences or lower tier teams in a conference would play each other. But at the high end is where the flex game plan really comes in handy. You're ensuring that Miami plays Georgia Tech. You're ensuring that Texas A&M plays a quality SEC opponent in the middle of November. That's yet another reason to recommend one flex game per year as part of a new way of doing things for college football in the 12-team playoff era.
Right. I absolutely agree with you. I don't want the committee punishing teams harshly, though, for implementing this model. So you have a 10-2 team playing a 10-2 team, and they both, it's basically a playoff game in which the loser is out. In some other conference, you have some 10-2 team playing Purdue, or they're playing Houston, some garbage can team, and they have a 1 game better record, and they absolutely blow them out. And this epic game is going down to the wire, and the committee says, well, they've got the better record, therefore they're in. We have to get over how many losses you have determines where you are in the college football playoff in order for this system to be implemented, in my opinion.
It's still a subjective measurement, even in your hands, Surreal. And I get your point. I totally get it. I've always been on board with it to an extent, but you do have to win football games. And just claiming our schedule was so tough, we were 7-5, can't get you to the college football
I'm
playoff
not
over,
saying
let's say, a
7-5.
10-2 team.
I'm not saying 7-5, but every single other college sport implements what I'm talking about. Some sports in college don't even look at your record. You could literally lose every single game and still make the tournament. That's how irrelevant record is in some other sports. So we just have to get rid of this idea of, well, this is a very NFL professionalized sport where there's a ton of parity. There's no parity at all. There's like 20 teams at the top who are really good, a lot of mid, and a bunch of garbage. And I want to incentivize as maximum as possible those top 20 matchups. How come in college basketball we're seeing all these elite matchups between ranked teams every single day? It's because there's no downside and all upside for playing these games. If we only want to see Ohio State play Texas in all these elite matchups, you have to incentivize schools to make those decisions. I don't want 7-5 teams. I'm not advocating for 7-5 team. I'm advocating for a 9-3 team that went on the road, played the number one team in the country better, or at number two, I guess, better than anyone else throughout the entire season, other than they lost to the number one team in the country by 3 points. That's all I'm advocating for.
Okay. Let's also understand that all those other sports that you're citing play far more games. Therefore, the metrics are more valid.
Some of them do.
Some of them do. Who plays 12 games in the season besides college football? College baseball, they're playing 55 games.
Right. I don't know how many matches are in gymnastics, but in gymnastics, they don't use record at all. They have a formula that just goes on the average of how many points you score. In every match, you just average it out. And then at the end of the year, they say, okay, these are the top 16 teams. They're in as at-larges. Everyone who won their conference is in. That's our tournament. So they don't even look at record at all.
Well, and I know little about gymnastics, but I would tell you that what little I know is that it's much easier to evaluate that this team scored 95 points, this team scored 92.5 in the same match, but that 92.5, despite being a loser, is better than the 87.5 that was scored by this other team in this other conference.
They don't do that at all. Every match is equal the same. So you go 87.5, that's your total, is 87.5. You go 92.5, you're 92.5.
That's what I'm saying.
That's what they do.
It's easier to do that than to try to reason, okay, so-and-so lost to the best team in the country. They lost by 14. Do we really consider that to be a strong performance versus this other team over here won by 14, but they beat the 40th best team in the country? How do you... It's just much more difficult. I'm not saying that we shouldn't try to strive to be more fair in our evaluation of these teams. Shoot, look at what I try to do every week. I'm just saying, just take the example I just gave. Some team beats the 40th best team in the country by 2 touchdowns. Somebody else loses to the number one team in the country by 14 points, 2 touchdowns. Which is the better performance? Or whatever point differential you want to give against those are difficult things to weigh. Now, obviously, over the course of 12 games, then you start to get trends to be able to determine those things better.
Right, and that's why this is a subjective sport at the end of the day. The only way to make it completely objective is you're going to have to get rid of like 100 teams. That's the only way to make it completely objective. That way they all play a similar level of competition. But at that point, you're just the NFL.
Yeah. If we want to take objectivity to the nth degree, nobody has that because even NFL teams have tougher schedules than other NFL teams. So that's never going to be achieved. And you can't predict the future. Therefore, when you hand out schedules, you can only be so accurate.
This does bring up a point, since what Mark was saying, about you can't predict schedules. What if college football did what the NFL does? You finish first place, you get the toughest schedule next year. You finish third place. What about that?
No, see, the issue with that for me, Matt, is the NFL is trying to achieve parity. There is no reason that anyone can argue with me that a team, just because you suck, you get an easy schedule, and just because another team's good, they get a tough schedule. Why not give equal opportunity and give fairness to the schedule? That's just like the NFL draft. Why should certain organizations, just because they're horrible at what they do, continue to draft in the... Why should that? I would make the first round completely random, and then the other rounds would be weighted based on the randomness of, let's say, you pick first in the first round, then you get the last pick in the second round, and it would be weighted perfectly for everyone to have the same selection and opportunity of players. No, the NFL is just trying to achieve parity, and everyone's just accepted that as, well, this is fair. No, it's not fair. You win the Super Bowl, you pick last automatically. That's not fair.
No, but it is entertaining.
It's entertaining, but it's not fair.
Okay.
Right. People don't want fairness.
Yeah.
Well, I do.
Well, but you're exactly right, Jarrell, because every time people suggest schedules, they're like, well, we want to see Alabama and Ohio State play. We want to see Texas and Michigan play. We want to, then Purdue plays Mississippi State, and well, that's not fair. And then I don't agree with that. I think that schedules should be made as equitable and as fair as possible.
But this goes back to something else that, we haven't talked about it tonight, but we've talked about it a lot in previous weeks and over a longer period of time. With 16, 17, 18 schools in a conference, there's just so many scheduling loopholes. And I've seen some comments in the chat tonight on, it was so much better when we had divisions. Well, it was easier to have divisions when there were 12 teams in a conference. In an 18-team conference, you can't have a 9-team division unless that's going to be the entirety of your schedule every year. And of course, you're not going to play the same 8 teams every year and exclude, the other whole half of your large conference. You want to be playing other schools in your conference. So one issue here with the mega conferences is that these conferences should be mandating that specific combinations of teams have to be rolling over and rotating each season so that you really are playing the full conference. What was it, Mark? Georgia has never played a road game at Texas A&M since A&M came to the SEC. That's a decade and a half ago. And that hasn't happened. That is malpractice by the SEC. And that is where we get into these trap doors with imbalanced in unequitable scheduling. That should not happen, period. Every team should be playing at the other school, every 4 to 5 seasons. It is unacceptable and should be seen as an outrage that a loophole in scheduling occurs like that in the SEC, with Georgia not yet visiting College Station one time in a decade and a half.
Meanwhile, it was mandatory that Texas A&M and South Carolina play every year from 2012 through 2025, 14 consecutive seasons.
Yeah, so this conferences just need to be buttoning things down in terms of regulating their schedules, but they choose not to. This is a choice. This is intentional.
Absolutely. In my opinion, this is only going to get worse, because if I'm the SEC, Big 10, Big 12, I want to incentivize getting as many playoff teams as possible. So what I would do, have the entire top play the entire bottom and have very few matchups between the top. If all you have to do is be Indiana, play nobody, and go 11-1, and you're in, or be Texas A&M, play hardly anybody, go 11-1, you're in, why schedule any game in conference between the top teams? All it does, Alabama, Tennessee, I'd get rid of that thing next week. Have Tennessee play Mississippi State every year instead of them. They would have made the playoffs this year. It's just ridiculous. And that's the way we're going. You are what your record says you are, is actively killing the sport, and it killed one of the greatest rivalries in the history of the sport. I mean, there was some, I saw in a report, some person reportedly for USC said, why does Notre Dame have this unfair advantage or massive advantage? The committee's rewarding losses. We need to stop rewarding losses. Reward wins. That's why you play the game, is to win the game. You don't play the game to slightly lose. So reward high-level wins. Don't reward mediocre to bad wins. I don't care that you beat Michigan State, Northwestern in back-to-back weeks, and some other team had to play Alabama and Georgia, and they went 1-1. That team is better than Team A. Team B is better than Team A. We can all get over this.
Anything else to reel?
No, I'll comment on that dude's super chat because he did invoke my name, so I feel like that's a fair thing to comment on.
Sure.
From Evil Ralph. Yes, blowouts happen. Blowouts is that's a stupid argument. The reason JMU and Tulane did not belong in the college football playoff is because their resumes were garbage. JMU played literally nobody. Their best opponent was Louisville. Oklahoma played 8 teams better than James Madison's best team they played all year. That is insane. That is unfair. That is unequitable. And about this whole SEC thing, BYU and Notre Dame are not in the SEC, and those teams would have been selected next in line. And yes, guess what? The Big Ten will probably three-peat. Just to wrap it up with Evil Badger. And guess what? They're still probably the second or maybe even third best conference if Texas Tech goes and beats Oregon. We don't need to memory hold the entire season where the Big Ten got absolutely humiliated from the middle to the bottom. Just because they have 1 or 2 elite teams at the top. Ohio State by themselves is not a conference. That is a ridiculous standard. By this standard, Clemson in the ACC was the best conference in 2018. That is absurd and moronic and stupid. Anyway, guys, I'm going to get going, and I guess I'll be watching Notre Dame and BYU in 2026 and not the Pop-Tarts Bowl.
Thanks to Real.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've tried to make that point time and time again. Now, in regards to evaluating these conferences versus which teams are succeeding in the playoffs. Now, the teams that are succeeding in the playoffs obviously have a huge, huge component there in evaluating the worth of the conference. Now, I have no issue with somebody who would say, you know what, those teams are worth more. Those games are worth more. We don't care if Mississippi State beats Arizona State. They couldn't do anything else. It doesn't matter. I have no issue with that if we are going to weight the conferences near the top and only really evaluate the playoff caliber teams in evaluating these conferences. But I'm saying if you truly are evaluating the conferences top to bottom, the SEC is currently the best conference and has been, but they may not win the most important games. They may have a glut of teams that are between like number 5 and number 15 in the country. And Indiana, Ohio State, and whomever else. We'll see about Texas Tech, maybe Oregon, maybe the best teams in the country. Absolutely. Both can be true. All right. Let's catch up with these super chats. Matt, we're working a second hour, if that's okay with you.
Yep. No, I saw them rolling in. Thank you, everybody.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Where were we? I think we are with Jackson here. Honestly, just beyond pissed about USC Notre Dame going away for a few years. On one hand, I'm happy BYU and Notre Dame will play each other, but on the other hand, there was a huge price to pay. Jackson, thank you so much for being a member for 28 months. Memberships are available here at the Voice of College Football. Thank you for the contributions, everyone. You can get those on the front page of the channel. Adam chimes in with this one. Matt, I respect you. You're a great commentator. I've always said that even though I may not have talent, I have an eye for talent. All right, my question now is, how does USC move forward with crazy Lincoln Riley and unqualified Jen Cohen? They must be sent to the goulash.
Well, Adam, I mean, what the short-term significance of all this for USC, just for USC football, not talking about the Notre Dame series, not talking about anything else. Just now that there's no Notre Dame on the schedule, right? Zero excuse. Zero excuse. You gotta go 10-2. If you do not go 10-2 this year, if you're Lincoln Riley, Jen Cohen needs to kick Lincoln Riley to the curb. But will she? Because there's a school of thought of, oh, well, USC's behind in the recruiting cycles. You need one more class in 2027 to make up the difference. Adam, I'm on record as saying no. You don't get that many bites at the apple. You've got to win 10 games in 2026, especially with Notre Dame not on the schedule. So it just brings up a point. If USC is 9-3 in 2026 and it barely misses the playoff, I'm thinking Jen Cohen probably will retain Lincoln Riley for 2027, but I wouldn't do it. And I don't think Lincoln Riley would deserve to be retained if he can't go 10-2. Like, you can't keep kicking the can down the road at USC. At some point, you either deliver or you're not the guy. And I think that 2026 should be seen as, okay, Lincoln, you got what you wanted. Notre Dame not on the schedule. You have to go out there and prove it and get it done. And if you come close, nope, you're not paid a lot of money at USC to come close. You're paid to get this program over the threshold. So some people are going to say, and I understand why, Lincoln Riley deserves 2 more years of runway at USC. Adam, I think it should be just 1. You better win 10 games or you should be out of here.
Jim, we appreciate you being here. Jim is quite the team player, as noted here. Voice of college football team player. Jackson, suggestion. Jim, thank you so much for the contribution. We're noticing you showing up just about every night. Jim, you've been a loyal supporter for a long time. Thank you for that, Jim. Jackson coming back with this one. Okay, 125 down and 25 to go. And we will have a second hour. Jackson urges us on, and he was the impetus for this. So here we go on to hour 2. Thank you for that, Jackson. Appreciate it. All right, Jim, thank you for the contribution. Sir, if I were judging, I'd give my Hoosiers a 9.9 for the regular season. Absolutely. A remarkable season. The best season in college football. The only undefeated team. We, of course, saw that with Oregon last year. Hopefully, Indiana, for its fans, will have a different fate than the Ducks. We shall see. Then we got Jackson coming back with this one. There it is. We have a second hour. Yay. Let's get Mark Rogers, the voice of college football, to 100,000 subs. Yes, please subscribe here. It doesn't cost you anything. It's no obligation, no commitment. There's nothing attached to it. It just bolsters our credibility, or the perceived credibility, actually. So please subscribe. Hit the like button. That's another component that doesn't stroke Matt or my ego in any such way. I don't even look at the likes, but please do it because it's connected to YouTube. YouTube treats a video or live stream that has a high percentage of likes much differently than a low percentage of likes, because they figure, okay, the people that regularly watch like this, we will serve it out into the traffic to see if other people will come in and take part. All right. Thank you for that, Jackson. Then we've got Evil Badger coming back, and I was a bit rough on Evil Badger. I feel bad. But it's a discussion, sir, for sure. Do you realize that if you just have the big brands play, someone has to take the L's? Absolutely. I don't know how to answer that, except for we're already seeing with more college football playoff games. Obviously, we're going to see 2 and maybe 3 lost champions going forward. But that's what we want to see. We don't want to preserve just 11-0 seasons, because that's the way we did it in 1975. Yeah, I don't really know what point you're making, but it's true. It is a good point. I don't know what you're driving at there. It all depends on, again, what we are using to evaluate these teams to select playoff teams. All right. Jackson's next up. Jackson, what's going on?
Doing all right. Just hanging out with Mark Rogers and Matt Zimmett, the great ones, all right here on the Voice of College Football. How y'all doing tonight, gentlemen?
Jackson, you were the elite utility player of all time.
Oh, I did my best.
You were all over the place.
All over here, there, everywhere. Just kind of like, where's Waldo? Oh, man. But I will say, when I saw that report about Notre Dame USC, I was like, I know it. Because it was like the signs were unfortunately there. Because that 12-year series with Notre Dame Clemson from 2027 to 2038, I was like, something's happening in Notre Dame USC. I didn't want to think it, but that's what was happening to it. And if it can happen this easily to Notre Dame USC, what makes me think this won't happen? I'm not saying it will, but what makes me think it won't happen to Georgia, Georgia Tech, Florida, Florida State, Clemson, South Carolina, Kentucky, Louisville? It's already got me a little nervous about those games, to be honest. I mean, I'm just happy we got those games at this point, but still, it's not a good look. And if there's any doubt whether college football is basically a mini NFL, well, today showed no doubt after what was happening today with the future of Notre Dame USC. I mean, on the bright side, we could see it in 2030. Crossing my fingers that we'll see it as a playoff game. But it's like Matt said, it's put up or shut up time, basically, for Lincoln Riley and potentially for Jen Cohen for 2026, because they cannot sit there and go, well, it's all Notre Dame's fault that we're not in. We went through everything because of Notre Dame. Notre Dame's beating us. That mean old Notre Dame. No. Can't do that now, Lincoln.
I want to step in and add one point that none of us have mentioned yet, and that is, what happens if the playoff expands from 12 to 16? Oof. And like we don't know that for sure, but I'm kind of thinking that's probably going to happen at some point in the not too distant future. Then USC is going to look even more cowardly for, pushing against the continuation of the Notre Dame series when there are going to be 4 more playoff slots. And like, oh, USC, you're worried that you're going to be 17 instead of 16? The optics are going to be terrible for USC if the playoff does increase to 16, which, again, it's probably going to happen in the next 2-3 years. ESPN's going to want more inventory. They're going to want more games. They're going to want, fewer blowouts. So watch out for that plot point and how that affects the optics of USC Notre Dame.
Oh, that's for sure. Definitely keep an eye on that, on what 16 teams can mean for the future of that rivalry, really, just like any of them, really. Gets me worried from time to time.
All right, Jackson. Anything else, sir?
Oh, man. Well, I will say I'm already just counting down to the granddaddy of them all. Basically, not only it being Alabama, Indiana for the first time meeting in school history, but also just count down to it also being the 100th anniversary of the game that changed the South, a.k.a. the 1926 Rose Bowl. And it was funny, though, because I was watching Johnny Matt Brown, the 1926 Rose Bowl hero, play a crooked sheriff on Tales of Wells Fargo the other night. I know that he's on Perry Mason, so I'm going to have to watch that one Perry Mason episode of our 1926 Rose Bowl hero, Johnny Matt Brown. But no, in the meantime, tell your friends, your family, and the cashiers of Publix about the magic of the Voice of College Football website brings you all right there on vocfb.com.
And Jackson, even though you do the best outro in college football, I'm going to interrupt and ruin it by letting people know that, of course, you have been racking up the SEC live bowl previews, correct? I saw one here just a few minutes ago with you and TJ and John sizing up Texas and Michigan. So people should check those out.
Oh, for sure. And I've got one coming up with Tucker Harlan, and there's one, and then next is Sonny Verma, and I believe I'm filming with Lewis Johnson of the LSU channel, and I'm having Parker Ainsworth from Locked On Codes joining me from the Houston side for
Very
the
nice.
Texas Bowl preview.
Yeah.
So,
All right, Jackson.
who
We
says we
appreciate
don't
all
care
the-
about bowls? Who says we shouldn't care about them? We care about them here at the Voice of College Football Network.
Absolutely, Jackson. We appreciate it, man.
Same here. Y'all have a good night. Sleep well. Stay safe. Stay warm. It's cold out.
Thank you, Jackson.
Evil Badger, I appreciate you clarifying and chipping in with another 5 there. So yes, the real MVP suggested that let's say we slash 100 teams, and of course during this last run of realignment and the refiguring of the college football playoff from 4 to 12, there was so much talk about, are there going to be, especially when the SEC and the Big Ten announced an alliance, and we're going to do what's best for the sport, and there were just some threads of hints there that led a lot of people to thinking, okay, is this going to be a 48-team sport or a 64-team sport or a 32-team sport? And yeah, you get down to 32. If you get down to the 32 most powerful brands in this sport, there's going to be some schools out there, i.e., I don't know, Minnesota or South Carolina, that better be used to going 2-10, if that, playing just a gauntlet of a schedule every year. So yes, Evil Badger, case in point, yes, if those group of 5 and the lower end of college football would be eliminated, yes, it would very much be an NFL looking set of records with a lot of pretty heavy brands suffering in the win-loss column for sure. Yep. All right, next up we got Adam stopping by. Adam, how you doing?
Hey, Mark, how are you? Hey, Matt, how's it going? Good. Thanks for having me on, guys. I won't be too long, but just a few things. Number one, a few years ago, people called me a moron, an idiot, even ugly, for saying that Lincoln Riley should not be the coach at USC. Now, Lincoln Riley first torpedoed the Ole Miss game, now is doing the same thing to the Notre Dame rivalry. And the reason he's doing that is because he wants to game the system so that he can have enough wins to get in the college football playoff, because he doesn't think USC can compete in the Big Ten. Speaking of that, Lincoln Riley is not the biggest problem. The biggest problem is the athletic director, Jen Cohen, who is incompetent and who has no business being an athletic director, and who was selected by USC's former president, Carol Folt. I was on a board of trustees once, Mark, and I'll tell you, there were 12 chairs around the table. I would look to my left and I would label that person moron number 1. To my right is moron number 2. At the head of the table is the biggest moron. So my point being, you have people in positions of power who fail upwards. That's why they're there. Lincoln Riley is not the answer for USC. In 2004, I believe, or 2005, when USC crushed Oklahoma 55-10, they did so because they were physical. They out-physicaled and dominated Oklahoma. What USC has become is a finesse program under Riley, who thinks he can win simply with skill players and who wants to avoid the most competitive teams to make the playoff, where he will invariably be beaten by actually competitive teams. Lincoln Riley should not be the coach at USC. Jen Cohen is an absolute disgrace, and she should be fired. And I want to know, USC has a huge endowment, and USC has a board of trustees. I think Steven Spielberg's on the board of trustees. Okay, what are these people doing to ensure that USC does not get buried in the graveyard of the forgotten past?
Well, I would say, Adam, that what USC power brokers have done, and Jen Cohen does deserve some credit for this, is bring aboard Chad Bowden. But Chad Bowden might have come along just a little too late for Lincoln Riley and for the USC program, because I know that it's not as though Lincoln Riley, Adam, you know this, and we would agree on this. Lincoln Riley didn't figure out how to recruit Southern California. That's Chad Bowden. Chad Bowden did that. Chad Bowden's program, Chad Bowden's operation is what did that. Lincoln Riley deserves really no credit for that. But Jen Cohen does. Like Jen Cohen bringing aboard Chad Bowden as general manager. So that's something tangible. But the thing is, and the thing I'm going to go back to is, Lincoln Riley's missed the playoff 5 seasons. 5 seasons. Think they'd put up with that at Alabama? Heck no. He'd be gone after year 3, I'd say. Year 4 max, for certain. Ohio State, you pick a few other really select programs like, Brian Kelly's out of there at LSU. You just can't keep missing the playoff at certain high-end schools. USC is being unusually tolerant, not necessarily of Lincoln Riley, though of course it is, but like USC is not acting like a big boy program, giving a coach a 6th season after missing the playoff 5 straight years. So I think a lot of your USC criticisms are on point. And of course, you were on the USC show with Tim again, and your criticisms have held up extremely well. There's no question about that. So that's definitely a big part of the story, a big part of the reality at USC. Here's something I wanted to mention when you were talking, Adam. Here's a crazy fact about Lincoln Riley and why his methods are now outdated in the current college football landscape of 2025 going into 2026. I hired a research assistant. I didn't pay him a ton of money, just in case anyone's wondering. But I paid him like some sandwich money. And I told him, look up all the shootouts among power conference teams in college football over the past 10 years. And a shootout, for purposes of the research, I gave this instruction to my research assistant. A shootout for purposes of record keeping was a game in which both teams scored 30 or more points. So again, this is just power conference team versus power conference team. Not talking about group of 5, not talking about power versus group of 5, just 2 power conference teams. In 2016, there were 71 shootouts, 71 power conference games in which both teams scored at least 30 points. You want to know how many shootouts there have been this year? 42. So, like, a decade ago when Lincoln Riley was just ascending at Oklahoma and he was in his sweet spot with Baker and Kyler and those loaded teams, like, we remember 66-59 against Patrick Mahomes, 62-52 over Oklahoma State in a Bedlam game. Like, Lincoln Riley got used to the idea of winning a game when giving up 45, 48, 51 points with Alex Grinch. He comes to USC, that did not fly. And so Lincoln Riley is still living in a 2016 world. He hasn't adjusted to the reality of 2025. Now, some people are going to say, and this is correct, that with the clock running on first downs, there are now fewer plays in games. That as much as style of play and other factors, is why there are fewer shootouts. Again, I defined it my own way. Other people can define it their own way, but I defined it as 2 teams scoring 30 or more in a game. Obviously, the clock rules have something to do with that, but it still underscores the point that this is not as much of a shootout-driven sport as it was in 2022, as it was in 2017, 2016. Lincoln Riley has not made that adjustment. So that is why, Adam, you're right in saying he's out of his depth right now at USC. I agree with you.
No, I appreciate that, Matt, and I respect that. I mean, in 2022, when Lincoln Riley was USC's head coach, and he still is, of course, I said on the USC show, and by the way, the USC show with Tim and Matt was fantastic. No question about it. Great show. But I said Lincoln Riley is not the coach for USC because Lincoln Riley does not believe in defense. He thinks he can outscore every team he plays and doesn't give enough credence to defense. Now, he did get D'Anton Lynn, but at the same time, what he didn't understand is that defenses have adjusted. They've adjusted through exotic blitzing. They've adjusted through cover 7. They've adjusted through pattern matching. They've adjusted through delayed blitzing. You saw this with Michigan against Alabama in the Rose Bowl. And so he can't just outscore opponents. So he brought an outdated philosophy. And then what he did at USC, he slightly tried to adjust when he brought on D'Anton Lynn. But then what he did was he thought, I'm going to cancel the Ole Miss game. And now he's going to suspend one of the greatest rivalries because he's trying to game the system to get into the playoff. That is a recipe for disaster because what wins championships is defense. Okay? If you look at the teams that have won national championships, in some situations they've had great offenses, but they have had overpowering defenses. Lincoln Riley's DNA and his philosophy is not good for USC, and it's outdated for college football. And then you have Jen Cohen. Now, Jen Cohen is not qualified to be an athletic director. Our NIL, it's funny because every month my bank account loses a lot of money because I keep giving money to USC. And I think, what's Jen Cohen doing? What are we doing to become a championship team? Suspending the Notre Dame rivalry? Losing to Oregon convincingly? Losing to Notre Dame? Throwing the ball on 4th and 2 in South Bend? Riley has to go. Cohen has to go. And these board of trustees, I'll tell you something. When I was on the board, more on number 1, more on number 2. The problem is inertia. People are so afraid to make decisions, but USC needs a fundamental philosophical change to be competitive. Until they do that, what you're going to see is more of the same, unfortunately. And that's my view on that. Now, am I wrong? I mean, look at the state of college football right now. Apart from USC, you got James Madison and Eugene getting slaughtered. You got Tulane losing by 42-10, nearly identical to what they lost to last time. You got Notre Dame, Texas, and Vanderbilt out of the playoff. We have an asymmetry between what the best teams are and what actually is. And what my point, Matt and Mark, is this. Smart people can solve problems. We do not have smart people in positions of power, or else it would not lead to results that you see at USC, and it would not lead to what we saw in the college football playoff. And I happen to be good friends with someone who's on the board at USC and who knows Lincoln Riley very well. And I don't want to say anything out of turn, but what I will say is that he is not the person to lead USC back to the physicality and the domination that was present in 2004 in the victory over Oklahoma and the Pete Carroll era.
Impossible to argue that. Like, Pete Carroll's teams were big, bad, physical dudes, and you can't say that about Lincoln Riley's USC. It's really pretty simple.
Well, the last thing I'll say is, look, the way you win football games, all right, I know scheme is an important part of it, but you know what? You beat other teams by punching them in the fucking mouth and winning the goddamn game and out-physicaling them, and USC is not doing that. Last thing I'll say is to you, Mark, I would like to get your advice because I'm flying back to New Jersey tomorrow, and I have a terrible, terrible fear of flying because I believe that when I take off, the plane is going to crash into a mountain. So is there any advice you guys could give me to feel a little bit more calm as I go on Delta Airlines flight out of Atlanta into Newark?
I would say this, Adam. You've come to the right place in regards to...
What if the plane blows up?
You've come to the right place here, Adam, because we're separating feelings from the facts and the realities. And the facts are that is a safer mode of transportation for you than it would be for you to drive to New Jersey, by far.
Adam, my advice would be watch the 2005 Orange Bowl during the flight.
Good idea, Matt. I think I will do that. And you know what? I'm flying first class tomorrow. I spent the money because I just felt like, if I'm at first class, it's less likely to crash. Irrational, but hey, hopefully it'll work. Guys, thanks for having me on, and thanks for listening to me. I always appreciate your commentary.
Thank you, Adam. Thanks for the contribution.
Thanks for your contribution, too.
Merry Christmas and have a great evening.
Merry Christmas.
Okay, and Adam, I'll be here Christmas Eve and Christmas night if you need any more USC fan therapy.
I'll be here.
Okay.
Take care.
Yep, you too.
Yeah, for anyone who wasn't here maybe an hour ago when we explained this. So I'm going to be here and there and everywhere, basically Connecticut to be exact, for the holiday season. So I will be popping up. We just don't know when because my schedule is my children's time. So basically, I will show up at whatever time. So I'm not going to disappear. I will still be producing some content and still showing up for some live streams. But hey, just expect, boom, out of nowhere, 10 a.m., 3 p.m., 3 in the morning, who knows when. But in terms of the regularly scheduled shows, we're trying to get those put together, which includes John D'Adamo hosting on Tuesday night. Then you've got Matt Zemek on Christmas Eve and Christmas night. And again, we're trying to fill all the other spots, but we'll be here as much as possible to take you through the postseason and any breaking news. All right, we got Dr. C checking in. Dr. C, what's going on?
Hey, how are you gentlemen doing tonight?
Doing well.
Fine.
How are you?
Thanks for being patient in the queue.
No, you guys are great. Yeah, actually, I was going to ask a question or a statement about something else, but since I am a USC fan as well, I have a question to ask. So, I've heard I've read somewhere that Penn State is highly interested in taking our defensive coordinator. Any truth to that?
The interest is there. The interest is there. Whether Penn State lands the plane and whether D'Anton Lynn makes the choice, that's what we don't know. But there's definitely mutual interest right now.
How would you grade D'Anton Lynn's performance? Because maybe I'm not being fair. I have not been impressed. I was expecting his UCLA defense looked fantastic, and I don't think USC has looked anywhere near that. What do you think?
So my grade would be incomplete, right? Because he inherited the mess that Alex Grinch handed to him, and he did a pretty decent job. Like USC's defense was solid in 2024 in year one. Now this year was a step back, but there were lots of injuries in the secondary. You know, Prophet Brown never played. Kamari Ramsey missed some games, including that Illinois game. And the defensive line was young. But going into the season, I thought the defensive line was good. I think a lot of USC fans going into the season thought, hey, we actually have some depth this time. But that turned out to be overstated because there were so many young players and they didn't come along as much. And so D'Anton Lynn bears some responsibility for that, as does Eric Henderson. But the real disappointment in my mind of this USC defense was Rob Ryan. And I think it's very discouraging and maybe even alarming that they retained Rob Ryan, because Matt Entz, the linebacker coach in 2024, before he took the head coaching job at Fresno State, Matt Entz did a great job with the linebackers. Eric Gentry was a world beater in just 1 month, the first month of that 2024 season in September, before he got injured against Wisconsin in week 4. Matt Entz in 1 month did more for and with Eric Gentry than Rob Ryan did throughout the whole 2025 season. So to me, Rob Ryan being retained is a real negative move. But as for D'Anton Lynn, you're giving him this 2026 recruiting class. This is presuming he stays, of course, which is no sure thing. But if he does stay, he gets this recruiting class, and Chad Bowden, is trying to make a splash in the portal in January. So we're obviously going to find out about that. If Lynn stays, he gets the 2026 recruiting class. He gets some prime defensive portal pickups in January. Then we'll have like a prove it year for D'Anton Lynn. But he had a great first year. He had a bad second year. But the problems go beyond him at USC, and recruiting's been part of that. Portal acquisitions have been part of that. So USC's trying to fix those things in this offseason cycle, and we just have to see if D'Anton Lynn's willing to stick around at USC, or if the siren song of going home to mama, he played at Penn State, if that siren's call is too strong for him to resist. So it's going to be really interesting. But overall, it's just an incomplete. Like, we need to see more of D'Anton Lynn to get a full and final verdict on him. Like, I don't like giving final verdicts on coaches unless or until I know like he's hit his ceiling or he's, like this is who he's going to be. It's pretty clear. There's lots of evidence. But if we're uncertain, I'm not going to like close the book on someone. So like I still don't know if D'Anton Lynn is a rock star or if he's mediocre. I think 2026, if he stays at USC, going to tell us a lot.
Well, okay, good point. The one thing, the one knock that I have on Lincoln Riley that I had, because I think he's doing a good job just because USC has been down for so many years. But my knock was on him not being able to recruit California well and Southern California. What did Bowden bring to get these players to stay? Because, DeBoer took all of Southern California year one, right? They're all Alabama, all the premier California talent. This year, it looks like USC is keeping it. What was the game plan? How has this changed?
Well, I don't know the minutia, the deep in the weeds details, but Chad Bowden obviously knows how to run a football operations shop. I mean, it's that simple on a general conceptual level. Like he knows how to build relationships with coaches. He knows how to give the NIL bag to players and execute that process. One of the things that Tim Prangley and I, former co-host on the USC show in 2024. Now I have two different co-hosts, Ethan and Crash, but in 2024, I was still doing the show with Tim. And one of the things that Tim and I explored throughout 2024, it wasn't that USC was lacking dollars, right? Because, of course, there are a lot of well-moneyed, influential people, boosters, donors in Southern California. The money was there, but it wasn't organized, right? And there were all these questions about, well, there was a guy named Dave Emmerich. You know that name? He wore the title of general manager for USC at that time, but he really wasn't doing the job of general manager the way Chad Bowden does. So this was an organizational restructuring more than anything else. And Chad Bowden is a true general manager. Blanchard over at Texas Tech, he's the general manager who's helped Joey Maguire get these absolute elite portal pickups. It's the main reason why Texas Tech is 12-1 and in the playoff quarterfinals. James Blanchard, the GM at Texas Tech, he's making more money than some coaches. But he's earning it. And Texas Tech, of course, has the investors to make that happen. But just the point being is that USC finally invested in a real general manager. Dave Emmerich was not a real general manager. He had the title, but he wasn't really doing the job that Chad Bowden is. So it really was a restructuring and getting an authentic general manager in place. That really represents the change at USC and why the Trojans got in the big recruiting class.
Wow. So, yeah. So, kind of like what we're talking about right now, Dillingham signed the extension and immediately he gets on the with the press and says is begging for $20 million. And I thought it was one of the saddest things I've ever seen. So
it's where we are. You need those mega bucks donors. That's just where we are in the sport right now.
How do you think college football? They're saying, like the other day, Coach O was talking about. Now, in the past we were sneaking the money through the back door. Now we just put it out in the front. Were programs spending this much cash in the past? I know there's no way of knowing, but do you think the money's comparable as to what was happening in the past?
Mark, I'll let you take that one.
No, I do not believe that. Was there big money going out at times to specific players? But I've talked to enough former players and people that were close to the team or, in the locker room or somewhere in the administrations of various college football teams in the last 20 or 25 years to know that, even the money the players are earning or being paid now is often overblown. Not that there aren't many superstar players and even just good players that are getting rich. and signing large contracts. But I think there's this thought out there that that just everyone's making a ton of money as long as you play for, a high-end power conference team, and that's not necessarily the case. Now, if you're playing a fairly prominent role as a starter at a large school, yes, you're making decent money. There's no question about that. But yeah, I would have to say, if I believe the people that I do, that I've talked to, and we're not talking about like one or two, I'm talking about 12 or 15, that those occasions were rare in terms of getting anywhere close. We're talking about high-end players making $2 to $3 million a year now. So that wasn't the case. A kid's head could be turned 20 years ago if they were thrown $20,000 or $30,000. That's a lot of money to a 18 or 19-year-old. It didn't have to be $1 million or $2 million. Again, it could be 20 or 30 grand. Could be a lot less than that, actually.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what was it? Lastly, so do you think if we fire Lincoln Riley next year, let's say he doesn't make the playoff again, paying him the $60 to $70 million is worth it?
Well, you'd hope that they could negotiate a lower buyout figure, but if they have to, I mean, if he, let's put it this way: if he goes 9-3 and like 2 of the 3 losses are absolute classics, then you probably swallow hard and give him 2027. But like if he doesn't come really close to a big year, if it feels mediocre, if it feels average, and like this thing's not going to turn the corner next year, they need to fire him, and it would be worth it to eat the dollars. But this also brings up the point that the way contracts are done, I've pounded this drum before. It's worth doing it again. ADs, schools should be drawing up contracts that are loaded with incentives and triggers. If you win a conference championship, if you win 10 games, if you make the playoff, if you win a playoff game, we will shower you with money. We'll give you all these juicy, lucrative bonuses. But at the start, we're going to give you, a modest salary. And you're not going to starve. You're not going to go into the bread line. But you have to earn top-tier money. We're not just going to give you Fort Knox up front. No, you win big, and then we give you Fort Knox. And once again, Indiana, of all places, right? Indiana has set the proper, wise industry standard. They didn't give Cignetti more money than God right off the bat, but he started winning at an elite level, and then they immediately lock him up for a $1 extension. It's exactly how this should be done. So it's just a reminder that, and even if you think you have the rock star coach, you should still be loading it up with incentives. You achieve this, you achieve this, you achieve this, you go up the ladder, then we'll give you all the money in the world. But until then, you have to earn it. So being on the hook for these large buyouts is just very irresponsible. I wonder when the industry standard, the regular industry practice, is going to catch up to what Indiana has done, but most schools are not doing that right now.
I wish I had the resources in the database to track this, but to Matt's point, I'm saying this without having the facts back me up, but I just know this, that yes, if you would track the contract extensions that have been given to head coaches and tracked their line of success or lack thereof, it's just alarming how many times a coach signs a contract that's originally in the 5 to 8 year range. These contracts are not like 2-year contracts that these coaches are originally signing at these large universities. They're signing 5 to 8 year contracts. And 2 years into this contract, typically a coach takes over a 5-win football team and elevates them to all but a 7-win football team, and he's getting a contract extension. Like, it happens all over the place all the time. And the only justification that I have ever heard for that, and this is more to the pre-transfer portal days because it doesn't matter quite as much now, is that The university just wants to show that they have confidence in the coach and he's going to be around. And so he can go out and recruit and say, hey, look, I just got a contract extension that shows that I'm going to be here. I don't know that necessarily justifies turning around. And you can, again, I wish we had the resources in the database, because I know this can be shown, how many times a coach has been fired a year after receiving a contract extension that has ballooned this buyout that the school now has to pay because they gave a 7-5 coach a contract extension. It's insane.
Yeah, like Nebraska shoving all this extra money to Matt Rule when he hasn't done jack squat. Like, that is just rank incompetence on the worst possible, largest possible scale. Like, that is just empirically dumb, foolish, wasteful. What, Troy Dannon, right? He's the AD at Nebraska. Like, how did that get vetted? How did that get approved? Like, he should be fired and he should be gone. And that deal never should have gotten into place. Like, Nebraska almost makes UCLA look competent. Almost.
Hey, and lastly, I don't know if you guys have touched this subject, because I just came in. Michigan, what are they doing? When are they really going all in on DeVore? Because I thought Dillingham was the guy, but he signed the extension. So
yeah.
is DeVore
So, you know, I see John from the Michigan channel. By the way, I hope you're catching John and TJ's Michigan channel. It is the YouTube home run hitter. There's really the Shohei Ohtani of the Voice of College Football Network. You better be checking out John and TJ. But, you know, seeing John in the chat reminded me, and this flows right into the Michigan thing. You know, the door is opening. The stars are lining up for John Harbaugh. You know, after the Ravens lost to the Patriots, that pretty much nails down the Ravens not making the playoffs. And so the NFL season ends on January 4. The transfer portal opens January 2. You know, you're just talking about 48 hours, okay? Like, Michigan can arrange something with John Harbaugh pretty much when the transfer portal opens. And think about this, you know, there's a well-established pipeline between the Baltimore Ravens and the University of Michigan, defensive coordinators, assistant coaches. So you get a Harbaugh, but you don't get Jim and his baggage. You get the other Harbaugh who knows how Michigan works. He hasn't been employed there, but again, he's been talking to Jim all these years. He would be able to step in and, you know, technically an outsider, but not really. Like, he knows the insides of the Michigan program. So you get the benefits without the negatives in terms of a coach needing to get up to speed with the program as, you know, a newbie or a novice. John Harbaugh would not be that. To me, that is the situation is there for John Harbaugh to be Michigan's next head coach.
Well, I think isn't perception and what was the other word? I just had it. Perception and optics massive in today.
People have said, Matt, you know, it's a Harbaugh, too much baggage, it's a stain. But John Harbaugh is not Jim. Like, John Harbaugh didn't do anything with Connor Stallions. John Harbaugh, you know, didn't get into these various messes. To me, it's an easy thing to separate, but apparently a lot of people can't make that separation, and maybe there's just too much scar tissue there. The other thing that has to be mentioned here, and I know that John and TJ at the Michigan channel would both agree with me, Ward Manuel should have been fired a long time ago. Like, how did he not get fired when the Sharon Moore thing blew up? Like, Ward Manuel still being in the AD chair, that's a joke. Like, that should have been done, boom, right away. And so Michigan is definitely playing catch up for that reason. They need to bring in a new athletic director and clean house administratively. I think that's where Michigan can get rid of the baggage. But I still think you go after John Harbaugh. But you do it with a new administration, new AD for sure.
Yeah, I still I think they really, really want to clean house. And I now lean towards DeBoer, because the rumor is that the whole Lincoln Riley, I don't know what I'm going to do, was honestly, the rumor was DeBoer's leaving Alabama for Michigan. And Kiffin wanted Bama. He wanted that job. So he was, playing. Kiffin is 10 steps ahead of everyone, right? So he was all, oh, I'm brokenhearted. I'm waiting for DeVore to leave Alabama, and I'm going to take that job. But it didn't work out, right? So then, hey, I got LSU, not too shabby. So that is the rumor. So I have to, the other name that comes up that I was really surprised because I thought he was retiring is Kyle Whittingham from Utah.
Yeah, my understanding, and I'm a longtime Pac-12 watcher when Kyle Whittingham and Utah were in the Pac-12. My thought from the people who cover the Utah program and the people who cover the Pac-12, such as like John Wilner, other, West Coast-based journalists, the read from them has always been that Kyle Whittingham was not going to coach forever. He would want to settle down. He'd want to enjoy life as a grandfather. And it was interesting in the immediate aftermath of the announcement that he was stepping down from Utah. Note this: the Utah-based outlets were calling it a retirement. National outlets such as The Athletic, Stuart Mandel, were saying, he might be interested in coaching elsewhere. Really interesting. And I'm not saying one side's right, the other side's wrong. It's just that's how it happened. That was the reporting when Whittingham stepped down. The Utah outlets were saying he was retiring from coaching, and the national outlets were saying, oh, he might consider another job. But my read of the situation has always been, no, Kyle Whittingham's going to call it a career. He wants to settle down. He's not going to coach into his 70s the way Pete Carroll's doing.
Yeah, I as well. But apparently there was some quote saying that he was in the transfer portal. So he's wanting to coach. He didn't want to overstay his stay at Utah, which he built that program. I loved, when you think of physical football, I think historically of a couple of teams. I think of like Iowa. I think of Kansas State. But the first team that came to mind was the Utah football, right? It was just nasty, smash mouth football. It was wonderful, and it fit his personality. But I think that if he was going to be Michigan's football coach, they would have announced it by now. I mean, were they waiting for that bowl that no one's really going to watch for him to go, oh, I need to coach this bowl? He could still coach it and, just like Summerall did, coach and then go to the next program. But, well, I guess we'll wait and see. It's one of the oddest hiring waiting till the last minute, crucially keep recruits, transfer portal opening. It's a disaster. It's very poorly, in my opinion, handled.
Dr. C, just two small tweaks on the Kyle Whittingham thing.
Yes.
Obviously, it would be a pretty awkward situation if he announced his retirement and Utah was the last stop and sending him off into retirement. Then he suddenly takes the Michigan job and coaches the bowl game. And then also, yes, he's done an outstanding job. There's no question about that. Let's understand, he was handed a 13-0 football team. Like he didn't necessarily build Utah football.
Right. Well, yeah. Well, he's kept a high standard for the whole time he's been there. Yeah. And I mean, that I would love, I think that smash mouth style would fit Michigan perfectly.
Yeah.
Right. And I think he brings that integrity, intensity that Michigan is wanting to kind of like, the Michigan man and the tradition and everything that football program stands for, that unfortunately is dealing with the black guy right now. Right.
He could be the 3 to 4 year bridge to the hotshot young guy that could be the 15-year guy, but he could be the credibility, the corrector of the reputation, the perception, and I think that he would be an excellent hire as long as he was focused and in it.
Here's kind of a shot in the dark. I was thinking about Bill O'Brien because he brought Penn State from one of their darkest times and kept that program, flourishing during that dark time. He might have been he's having a terrible season at BC, but he has that personality that I think would have been a perfect fit to kind of bring back some of that, some of that credibility, clean house. And he just says it like it is. I mean, we all know Bill O'Brien.
Okay.
He just
I was
says
going to
it.
say, does Bill O'Brien have a personality? I was mistaken there.
He's intense. I mean, have you seen that of chewing out of Brady and him having a fight in the sideline? You know, that guy is piss and vinegar, right?
Yep.
I think a guy like that, maybe bring him in for a couple of years of Winningham, just kind of cool things down. And I think Kenny Dillingham was the guy, but I think they're just hell bent on DeBoer. I think because they would have announced someone by now, right? Who else could it be that they're waiting for? Unless you know something I don't. Who else are they waiting for? I mean, I think Harbaugh, but I think they want to clean Harbaugh name, out.
Unless they go the NFL route, then they've got a lot of guys that they can wait on.
Yeah, and this is where the transfer portal being in January now instead of in December, it's a different plot point. It's it alters the calculus. There was much more urgency on needing to hire a guy in mid-December at the latest. If you had to fill a vacancy, but now with the January portal, yeah, schools can wait a little bit longer. They can't wait forever, but they can wait a little bit longer. Let's also keep in mind that you have all the playoff quarterfinal games on the one on New Year's Eve and the 3 on New Year's Day, and they could just be waiting for the Alabama-Indiana game to run its course, see what happens there. So Michigan doesn't have to make a hire right now. I mean, it will need to make a hire basically by the end of the NFL regular season. Black Monday. No later than that. Than Black Monday, they'll need to have someone, but they can afford to wait until then.
And the fact that recruits aren't just flying out of Michigan, if that started to happen, I think they would have announced something sooner. But it seems like they're keeping the class pretty well, and the folks are staying. So at least in that sense, they're doing a good job. All right, well, I'll let you guys go because I've taken way too much of your time. But it's been a pleasure talking to you, gentlemen, and have a great night.
Thank you, Dr. C. Appreciate you being here as always.
Anytime. Take
care. Thanks, man. Appreciate you all being here at the Voice of College Football, including one Tim Prangley here, who's throwing out the bottom of the barrel there with Ty Willingham. He the author of the 0-12 season at Washington, of course, but there were some highlights there as well. I kid because I care, as was once stated by Johnny Carson and then Chris Myers. Clay Helton, also a fan favorite of many of you who have ties to USC, of course. All right. Next up, before we get to our caller, just keep in mind, vocfb.com. You get a perspective on college football that you won't find anywhere else in regards to the articles we provide on a regular basis, and also the shop that has most likely your favorite team. We've got about 20 to 25 of the top brands of college football. So combine your favorite brand, the Voice of College Football, with your favorite team, and voila, there you go. You can see some of the items right there. Trey, what's going on tonight?
Oh, man, some crazy stuff, man. I love this show today. A lot of good calls coming in today. And what's up, Matt? I hope you're doing good. Mark, hope everybody's doing good today.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Trey. How are you?
I'm all right. Disappointing when I seen the Colts and 49ers. My girlfriend's a 49er fan, and I like to see Old Man Rivers win. That did not – you can't win with no defense. You can put up all the points, but you can't rely on your offense. And that's what's going to happen to Miami and Ohio State, sadly. They're going to have no defense to hold Ohio State, and their offense can't keep up. So that's what I'm thinking is going to happen here. But first,
I'm starting to get brainwashed by all these Miami fans and all these Facebook and other social media posts. I'm saying that, boy, they're chalking this up as a win.
There's two fan bases here I don't like. It's always Miami. They can't get over 2002. And then you got the Baltimore Ravens and their fan base. They hate John Harbaugh just because of one bad season. But they went to the playoffs like 10 straight years since he got there. So, and it's like that small faction that don't know what the fuck they're talking about. I'm tired of that. I'm tired of it. But, before I want to say, since you're a USC guy, I'm very sad about that Notre Dame and USC rivalry not renewing. I'm tired of that. I'm tired of these rivalries getting ruined by geological mapping. I'm tired of it because someone's crying. Like, just play the damn game, man.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you caught our discussion with DeRio MVP,
No.
who brought up a lot of points about it, but I do think that Lincoln Riley is being a little weak sauce here with wanting the game to be played early. I understand the need for that. I understand USC trying to protect itself and its team against the rigors of the Big Ten schedule. I understand that conceptually, but I think if you're USC, you welcome the best in competition. You take on all comers. You hold yourself to the highest standard. Like USC is one of several programs that should act in a big boy fashion, and the Trojans aren't. But what DeRio MVP brought up, if you missed it, this was a salient point. If USC said no dice to Notre Dame specifically because of Notre Dame's memorandum of understanding that if Notre Dame finishes in the top 12, it gets in no matter what. Like, that is a legitimate negotiating objection on the part of USC. Now, I do not know for a fact. This is speculation. But if hypothetically USC refused to play Notre Dame specifically because of that memorandum of understanding, that would be a legitimate objection, because Notre Dame is trying to get a unique benefit only for itself that no one else has, and USC would be reasonable to say that's not fair. You need to rescind that memorandum of understanding if we're going to play you on a continuous basis. So I don't know what the actual reality on the ground is, but if that was the reason Jen Cohen and Lincoln Riley said no to Notre Dame, that would change my thinking, and that would be a valid basis for discontinuing the series.
I would say I would not like Notre Dame to join a conference. I have been seeing them so long. I think for a long, long time, since the 80s or 70s, they've been by themselves. I don't like that. Too much conference changing in the beginning with. It got ridiculous. You're destroying rivalries that were great and built on tradition, and we don't even have that anymore either. So are they willing to risk these rivalries just because of a little dispute with Notre Dame? Well, apparently, yeah, because they don't care about anything else.
Well, and just to be clear, the thing about playing Notre Dame is, you don't want to play a game if it's going to knock you out of the playoff, and if you think that the risk is going to be much more than the reward. But I would also say that if the playoff expands from 12 to 16, you shouldn't be worried that you're going to finish outside the cut line in a 16-team playoff. If 12, maybe, but if the playoff expands, and here's Tim with the comment about USC doesn't have to prove anything. I understand where that comes from, because if the risk is more than the reward, and DeRio MVP said this as well, then why do you play that game? But if the playoff expands to 16, then the idea that USC should be really worried of, we might finish 17th instead of 16th, then the optics would look different. I know we're not there yet, but I do think the playoff is expanding to 16 in the not too distant future. I think probably 2 years, maybe not next year, but certainly 2 years. And so it remains to be seen how this is all going to look and how this is all going to play out.
I tell you what's sad: the FCS has a better playoffs than Division I right now, and that's how bad it is. Everybody's getting hyped about the FCS. No one really as big as the CFP.
I'll push back a little bit on that. The first round did not figure to be very good, but these quarterfinals, which we haven't really talked about them that much, they're really interesting. Like Oregon, Texas Tech, that's a really intriguing game. Alabama, Indiana in the Rose Bowl.
Mark pointed that out. That was actually my favorite game, Oregon and Texas Tech.
Yeah, and Ohio State, Miami, like the rematch of the 2003 Fiesta Bowl. Like the only one I don't really like is Ole Miss, Georgia, because it's a rematch. I want my postseason tournaments to be fresh and original. But that game should still be fun, and it's going to be a great atmosphere in New Orleans. And by the way, Mark, we talked about this previously on previous Monday shows. There were 2 all SEC Sugar Bowls in the 1960s, 1960 and 1964. I looked it up. So it is not unprecedented to have 2 SEC teams playing in the Sugar Bowl. But anyway, back to the playoff. The first round did not excite me much. But these quarterfinals are really, really intriguing. And, under the 4-team playoff, and for people, and again, people who think the 4-team playoff is better than the 12-team playoff, you don't get Oregon, Texas Tech in a 4-team playoff. You have a committee in a boardroom deciding which team gets into the semifinals. Here you have Oregon and Texas Tech deciding it on the field the way it should be. And you have Miami, which wouldn't have gotten into a 4-team playoff. Miami gets its chance against the big bad Buckeyes. And you have this incredible Alabama-Indiana Rose Bowl in which, the blue blood is the scrappy underdog 9 seed, and the Nowhereville program with almost 0 college football history, tradition, and pedigree is the 13-0 number 1 seed. You don't get these matchups with a 4-team playoff. Look, the 12-team playoff, very flawed for a million different obvious reasons that we've been talking about the past 2 weeks or so. And yet for all those flaws, this is miles better than the 4-team playoff. And people need to realize that.
Come on now. I can't sit back here and agree with this.
Okay,
I like
Trey, 4-team playoff. Who's out? Texas Tech or Oregon?
Oh, god dang. I'd say Oregon.
Yeah, one of them don't make it. So
I would say
Oregon. Okay.
But Trey, wouldn't you rather have Oregon and Texas Tech decide it on the field than a committee determining which team goes to the semifinals?
It'd be too big. It'd be way too big. And it don't allow the best. I don't think Oregon is the best.
Of course it allows the best.
You just said you're excited about Oregon, Texas Tech, right?
That doesn't mean they're the best. They're the best matchup I see on paper right now.
Okay, Trey, let me try to explain this to you. Regardless of the garbage that we saw in the 2 late windows last weekend with James Madison and Tulane playing, you have roughly the 10 best teams in America competing in a tournament. And even if the committee screws it up by 1 team or 2 teams, even at the outside, at the very most, you have 8 or 9 of the best college football teams in America, the best, playing. Would you not want that? Look, as Matt just outlined, look at these quarterfinal games. I am expecting really good football. Will we most likely get a clunker? Yeah, the odds say, the probabilities that one will be a clunker. But we don't go into the process knowing that one of them is going to be a clunker, or 2 or 3, as we did last weekend. Yes, the group of 5 situation may need to be addressed. And even if it's not, we're going to have 1 clunker. This year was an aberration with 2 group of 5s in. We're typically going to have 1 clunker in the first round that we can predict and see coming from a million miles away. But the other matchups are going to be legitimate. I don't know what you don't like about that.
I just I like the best 4. I mean, you can't have everybody.
Nobody knows who the best 4. That's the point, Trey. Between Oregon, Texas Tech, Ole Miss, they're all 1-loss football teams. You got to leave 2 out of those 3 out, and you really have no valid reason other than just weighing resumes or eyeball tests and saying Texas Tech's better than the other 2 because they won a conference championship. Or Ole Miss played in the best conference, so we're going to let them in. Or Oregon may have played in the best conference, so we're going to let them in. No, you got all 3 of them in. And they're all 1-loss teams. We're not talking about letting 9 and 3 teams into the playoff. We're talking about separating 11 and 1, 12 and 1 teams, where under what you want, 2 of them would be out.
I like the 4-team playoff, but if it expands to 10, not to 12, 16, and the like 24 and stuff, 10 would be perfect. If it's like this right now, and minus the other games that we just saw that was bad.
Why 10?
Perfect.
Because if you have 10, then eight would means you have 4 quarterfinals. So if 10, that means you have 2 play-in games. You have a 10 versus a 7 play-in game and an 8 versus 9 play-in game, and then you get to the quarters. Whereas now you have 4 play-in games, so each of the 4 first-round winners plays one of the top 4 seeds. It's a more even, balanced tournament. So why 10?
Because you think about it, what we just seen, we wouldn't have as much bad, matchups as we had with James Madison and Tulane. I'm not going to say they didn't deserve it, but also the matchups can be fresh too. Like we got Georgia and Ole Miss, and you got Trey, but there's nothing about 10 teams which means you're going to get fresher matchups. Like all the committee had to do, and Mark and I talked about this last week, was the committee just needed to honor the principle of not scheduling or bracketing, I should say, rematches. You put Ole Miss as the 5 seed, Oregon as the 6. That way Oregon's playing Tulane, not a rematch, and James Madison's playing Ole Miss, not a rematch. But the committee was lazy. It just went ahead and scheduled, bracketed Ole Miss and Tulane, and it put Ole Miss in the path of Georgia, the 3 seed. If Ole Miss is the 5 seed, you're getting rid of 2 rematches there, and then you could have put Miami as the 9 seed against Oklahoma. Alabama and Texas A&M would be all SEC in the first round, but they didn't play during the regular season. So it just would have been so easy to seed and bracket the tournament differently to avoid rematches, that there's nothing inherent or baked in about a 10-team field that would somehow guarantee fresher matchups than a 12-team field. It's just about being responsible with bracketing, which the committee very definitely was not. I agree with that. They did a terrible job. I don't know where
they did.
There. But what would be y'all's lucky number of a playoff team that be in? I mean, what how many teams would y'all put in there? Would y'all stay with 12? 16?
I think 16, and I would say 16 for this. Not only would you not have buys, so you'd have everybody playing every weekend. I kind of like that part, but the bigger reason is 16. And I know some people are going to complain it's way too much, and that means you're going to go to 24, you're going to go to 32. No, I really do think 16's right. Partly because this is like a full NCAA tournament bracket for one region. A 1 versus a 16, an 8 versus a 9. Like you get all the seed matchups. So like there's kind of that true bracket feel. But here's the biggest reason. The biggest reason is that 10-2 Vanderbilt, 11-2 BYU, legitimately good teams that deserved a shot to, at the very least, play their way into the conversation, didn't get included. So I think at 16 teams, that's gonna include 10-2 teams, 9-3 teams, teams on the margins. A year ago it was that glut of 9-3 SEC teams: Alabama, Ole Miss, South Carolina. At 16, you're capping it most seasons at 10-2, 9-3. But when you get into a 24-team field and certainly a 32-team field, then you're allowing 4 lost teams to get in. And so 16, I think, is the exactly right cut line. And people are going to say, Matt, no, you're going to want 24 a few years from now. No, I really do think 16 is the number where you include that marginal 10-2, 11-2 team from the Big 12, Vanderbilt from the SEC, a 10-2 team from the Big 10 that, you're not sure if they're really great, but like you get them in and they get their chance. Like the idea that 10-2 Vanderbilt and 11-2 BYU did not get in, that seems unfair to those particular schools. And BYU, by the way, BYU was 10-2 a year ago, and had a compelling case to make and didn't get in either. So, like, in many ways, BYU is the ultimate poster child for why 16 is the sweet spot in terms of making sure that good teams that have good records, and you might not be convinced about really how strong they are, but they deserve their shot on the field. 16 really is my sweet spot and final settling point.
You know what? I'll agree with that. I like what you said. Those are good points, and I would be okay with 16 then, because the way you said it in the bracket feel, just like the March Madness, it makes more sense with 1 versus 16, the highest and the lowest. I like everything you said, and they did deserve it. Vanderbilt deserves to be there, and BYU deserved to be there. And a lot of these teams missed out this year, but also it had that excitement of who goes in and who's out. That's another thing I liked about making it smaller. It makes it meaningful for every game more. That's just my own opinion. To make it more feel, because if you just got 16 and you know those 16 teams going to be in, it's like everybody don't want to fight for it to be in and out. And that's just me.
All right, Trey, we appreciate you being here. Certainly call back anytime.
Yes, sir. I would say this. I'm picking Georgia to beat Ole Miss, and I'm starting to get brainwashed too by Miami, but I'm not going to get them excited. I'm sorry. Ohio smashes Miami, and Oregon loses to Texas Tech. I love my Texas Tech Red Raiders. They're going to be great. And Indiana blows out Alabama.
Okay.
I hope
Thanks,
everybody
Trey.
has a Merry Christmas.
Yes.
Merry Christmas. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Good night, Trey. Final comment coming in from Jim, member for 13 months. So, folks, you can become a member here at the main channel at the Voice of College Football. So please consider that. I'm hoping the adults in the room don't ruin the playoffs. Absolutely. Matt, Trojans Wire and the USC channel at the Voice of College Football. What's going on this week?
So we're writing. I wrote a couple of fiery columns on USC Notre Dame. So you want to go over to trojanswire.usatoday.com for all the opinions. My staff writers have also written op-eds, a lot of forceful opinions from our staff at Trojans Wire on the end of the Notre Dame season, of the Notre Dame series, or for the next 4 years, and what that means. And then I'm going to be with Ethan Inman and Crashlet Collier, my colleagues on the USC show, Tuesday, 7 p.m. in LA in the West, 10 p.m. In the East. So obviously, you want to check in here with Mark Rogers, or I should say with John from the Michigan channel for the Tuesday night national show, but also poke in at the USC show for more opinions from, you've heard my opinions, but you can get Ethan's and Crash's opinions on the stoppage, the halting of the Notre Dame series. So plenty on USC Notre Dame at Trojans Wire and the USC show here at the Voice of College Football. And one final time, I will be doing Christmas Eve and Christmas night, Wednesday, Thursday, right here at this normal time, 10 in the East, 7 in the West. So I will be taking the baton from Mark so that he can spend time with his family. Very happy to do that for you, Mark.
Thank you so much, Matt. Don't be surprised if I pop in with maybe a mid-afternoon Christmas, because my Christmas festivities and events are kind of split, and I think the house is going to be empty for a few hours mid-afternoon. So again, I'm going to pop up from time to time, and because of the holidays and because of my travel schedule, actually 10 a.m. Eastern with the Ohio State Buckeyes live show with me and the crew coming up here Tuesday in just about less than 10 hours. And then right after the Miami live show with myself and Cam Underwood on the Miami channel. So back-to-back Ohio State, Miami. How about that? With the big game, of course, coming up here in about 10 days. Matt, appreciate you being here on Monday nights. It's so fun to talk college football with you.
Always a pleasure. And, for everyone else, Merry Christmas, and I'll see you on Christmas Eve night. The Hawaii Bowl it probably will still be going on. So, keep one eye on Sagapolu Tele and the other eye here at the Voice of College Football.